Good morning, everybody. I had a little bit of a different idea for a video planned for today, but then something came out late last night and I feel like I should take the time to talk about it with you guys. This is something we talked about last week, which are balance changes. As you may remember, we recently got some updates to a few cards that were changed here at the beginning of the month. This was actually just a couple of days ago. And we were promised more extensive balance changes for TEPPEN coming in March. And now we have a better idea of what's going to be adjusted when that happens, but we don't have specifics in terms of those details. What we did get in an overnight update to the website were specific cards and hero arts that are going to be targeted in some way, whether that is a buff or a nerf or something a little more ambiguous than that. So I wanted to take time to talk with you guys about that. I'll include a link in the description to the article so you can go and read it for yourself, but the majority of this text that's already here is really similar to what was in the initial balance change announcement that came out in late January, which is just, hey, we're keeping a close eye on things, we're trying to monitor what hero arts are popular, which cards are dominating, and then based on that data, we're trying to make some adjustments, which, you know, that's what we can hope for, is that they're paying attention to things. And you may remember me being skeptical about the changes that we just recently got being kind of short-sighted and a little late to the game. And this list is a little more comprehensive. Now, again, we don't have specifics, but what we do know are these are the cards that are going to be targeted, and these are the hero arts that are going to be targeted in some way, whether that is a buff or a nerf, don't know just yet. So let's take a look at the list on the post. We have Iris, which is a core card, Helm Antenora, Soul's Return, Surge of Demonic Power, Huitzil, and Starvation Impulse for cards. And then under hero arts, we have Shinku Hadoken for Ryu, we have Yawn for Chun-Li, which I think a lot of people are going to be excited to see on this list, and Shadow Blade for Morrigan. So we'll go through these and talk about these on an individual level. So Iris is a card most of you guys are going to be familiar with. She's been available since Core, which was the initial set when the game launched in July of 2019. She is a 5-cost 1/6 with a shield and MP boost 50. And what that means is your MP generation is increased by 50%. I've kind of always believed that this card is a bit overtuned for what she does. Her being 5 cost allows her to fit into dual color decks, specifically ones that rely on the green units for battery and then unloading tons of resources, and perhaps another color. Black is a really popular choice. Specifically Spike Launch Nergigante is one option. The black and green that's kind of been around for a long time kind of fits really well into that shell. So in my mind, I think Iris is probably going to get a nerf in some way. I think the most reasonable way to go about it would be to make Iris cost 6. I don't think you need to adjust her stats all that much. I'm a big believer in, raising the floor, don't drop the ceiling, so to speak. And what I mean by that is I think things should be buffed to be in line with what's really good in terms of the meta. Don't take everything that's on the top and drag it down. I think that's much less interesting. And I think that kind of design philosophy fosters variety, which is something I really want to see. I want an excuse to dig into some hero arts and some cards and deck archetypes that haven't seen a lot of play recently. I want a really diverse meta, and I know that that's hard to achieve. That's a tall order. Balancing in any game, card games included, are not easy. But I do think that, if they were to nerf perhaps, Iris's MP boost to anything below 50, I think that would make her borderline unplayable. And that's because Layer, who is a 4-cost MP battery unit. She's a 1/5. She also comes with the shield. He has MP boost 30, and then she has that extra when she's played, deal damage to a flying unit if your opponent has one. I think Iris would just kind of fall by the wayside, and while I think Iris is really good and overtuned, I don't want to see her just fall off completely. So my prediction is that Iris is probably going to see some kind of nerf. In fact, I think the majority of things on this list are going to see some kind of nerf. The next card is Helm Antenora. It is a 4-cost purple unit that came out with the Devil's Awaken last November. It's a 2/5 that says whenever it takes damage, it is going to deal its attack in damage spread randomly among enemy units. I do like this card. I think this card is very, very good. It's got tons and tons of value. I think they should leave it alone, though. I don't really think it merits any form of a nerf. This isn't like a Beltway, where Beltway gives you a body and it sets your opponent back by at least 4 MP. That's not what this is. It definitely has a strong effect, but I don't think it has such an oppressive feel to it in all matchups. Now, if you're playing Ryu and you're up against Hell Antenora, sure, it's going to feel really oppressive because all that direct damage you're doing is getting reflected right back at you. And it's going to feel like you take 1 step forward and then 2 steps back. But in most other matchups, Hell Antenora is not really going to feel that way. So, you know, I don't really think it should be adjusted all that much. If anything, I think they could give it a little less health and maybe a little more attack. So it's kind of more of an even trade, not necessarily a nerf, not necessarily a buff, kind of ambiguous, but we'll just have to wait and see. Next is Soul's Return. It is an epic 8-cost purple action that also came out with the Devil's Awaken. And this action says you return all units on the field to their respective decks. If you paid attention to the TEPPEN World Finals in December and the meta around that time, you'll remember that this card was really popular. It counters a lot of decks, and bouncing units is really, really good, especially for just kind of resetting the board state and getting yourself a more advantageous situation. Resonate decks use this a lot, and this is especially paired really well with the next card on this list that we'll talk about here in just a second. I don't think that this card really needs a nerf, though. 8 MP to return all units to their decks, I think, is pretty fair. In fact, I would even suggest that this card could be buffed a little bit to bring it in line with Cruel Game, which is a new legendary that we got from the Force Seekers. It's a black action that says for 7 MP, it basically evens up the number of units on your field. So if you have 0 units and your opponent has 3 and you use Cruel Game, it destroys all 3 of their units. If you have 1 unit and your opponent has 2, it's going to destroy 1 of their units at random. So it's kind of a reset and even up the board state sort of situation. That's why I think Soul's Return could cost 7 MP and be okay. So this is probably the one card on the list that I would be okay seeing some kind of buff. I actually don't think it's too out of control. It definitely looked out of control back in the day, and if you go back and watch the TEPPEN World Finals replay, it's going to tell a very different story. But that was a very different meta. You know, we're 2 months ahead of that now, essentially. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a buff here. You guys may disagree with me on this, but I would be okay with it. One card that I am sure you guys want to see nerfed into the ground, like dig a 6 feet hole, fill that hole with cement after you drop the card in it, bury it, and put a landfill on top of it, and that is Surge of Demonic Power. This is an incredibly overpowered card, even if it doesn't see as much play right now because Resonate has kind of fallen off in terms of popularity. But it's a 6-cost legendary action from the Devil's Awaken, it's purple, that says that all of the mana cost for all cards in both players' hands and EX pockets is changed to 1. It's incredibly powerful for Resonate. It was kind of an anti-growth card because it makes those growth levels much more difficult to achieve, and saw a ton of play to the point where Resonate players were mulliganing their hands if they didn't get Surge of Demonic Power. Now, like I mentioned before, it's not seeing as much play, so it's not as troublesome, but I do think this card is overpowered. They could do something simple, like just increase the cost, but even if this card costs 10 or 9 or 8, it would still see play, absolutely. So a couple of suggestions I've heard from the community members, some people that I've talked to after this update on the website came out, were to adjust the ratio of reduced costs on the card. So maybe like cut the cost of the card in half, rounded up or rounded down, something like that would be a little more fair. Because again, while I think Surge of Demonic Power definitely needs a nerf, I don't think it should just completely fall off the face of the earth. But this is a tricky one. This is probably the trickiest card on this list to balance, so I'm really eager to see what they end up going with. This is a new one. This is Huitzil from the Force Seekers. It is a 6-cost 2/8 unit. It's an epic unit that has anti-air and it cannot attack traditionally. And it also comes with a shield, but if it's ascended, it gets 4 more attack and it can attack regularly. In terms of card value, just based on the numbers, Huitzil is absolutely bonkers. You get so much for 6 MP, and there are situations where it's not even that bad to play it unascended. Anti-air completely shuts down almost all forms of aggressive decks, because most aggressive decks in the meta right now need to have some form of flying, and Huitzil has anti-air and says, no, you're not going to fly over me, you're going to take 6 to the face, and I'm not going to take any damage because I have a shield. Huitzil is really good. When Zenrano and I did our crafting guide, we put Karin over Huitzil. Looking back on that, I'd probably walk it back and put Huitzil as number 1. This card is really, really good. I definitely think it should be adjusted, and I think it's for sure on their radar for some kind of nerf. And you know, being a big contributor to why Yawn is so good, I'm sure a lot of people won't be sad to see it adjusted. So we'll just have to see. The last card on this list is Starvation Impulse, and I'm kind of surprised to see this card here because I don't really think it's that big of a deal. It is a new common action, it's black, and it says for 2 MP, you sacrifice 3 life and give a unit +1/+1. But if one of your units has ascended at least one time during the battle, it also gets +2/+2, essentially making it a better psycho power. Aggressive decks right now in the meta are already kind of in that mid-tier, tier 2 kind of range. The meta is very much developed around mostly controlled decks. And I kind of want to see that change. I want aggressive decks to be just as viable. And I think nerfing one of their really good tools in Starvation Impulse is kind of a mistake. I think it will be nerfed. In what way, I'm not sure. They may increase the Ascension requirement to get the bonus stats, which, you know, if it's at least 3, then this card would definitely see a lot of play, or a lot less play, excuse me. So I hope they don't go too extreme, but again, not really sure what they're going to go with. It's probably a nerf, and personally, I hate to see that. There are 3 hero arts on this list that are set to be adjusted. The first one is Shinku Hadoken, which is Ryu's best hero art, one of the best hero arts in the game. It is 18 AP to deal 7 damage to an enemy unit. A lot of people specifically have been saying that they think Ryu is ridiculous because he deals so much damage when you play your units. You don't even have to think, you don't have to target anything, it's all instantaneous. I don't think Ryu needs a nerf. I think if you're gonna adjust this at all, I think you should increase it to 20 AP like you did with Dark Destruction on Wesker last year and just leave it there. If you reduce the damage, I think that is way heavy-handed, and it's Ryu's really only super viable hero art. So if you adjust it too much, Ryu's gonna fall off the face of the planet, and I don't want that to happen because I like playing as Ryu. I like playing with the red elements and the red cards. So I don't want to see Ryu go away, and I think that the Shinku Hadoken potential nerf, if that's what it is too much. And to the people who would come and say Ryu is too powerful, I would invite you to take a much closer look at the meta and what's good, and I would advise you to just get better. I know that's going to seem really, really harsh, and Ryu does seem oppressive if it's played really well. But Ryu is not dominating in the meta right now. I wouldn't say he's a tier 1 deck. He's definitely mid-tier. Can he hang? Sure, absolutely. But, you know, Shinku Hadoken is very powerful, but I don't think it's too much. And I think people just need to recognize how to play around it and just get better. I know that I had to do the same thing. So, yeah, I think Shinku Hadoken's fine. Yawn is on this list. Yes, you were wondering if it was on this list. You were probably happy to see it here. You want to see it nerfed into the ground and ground up into dust and just fade away forever. So we'll see what happens. I think the wording for Yawn should be changed. I guess I should tell you what Yawn does first. It's 15 AP. It's a Chun-Li hero art that gives one unit this effect that says when it leaves the field, you gain +4 MP. And that's not just on death. It's if it's bounced, if it returns to the deck, if it's anything, if it leaves the field. If you ascend over the top of the unit, you get the bonus MP. And it doesn't stack, but it's still really, really good in terms of value. I think you need to increase the cost on this for sure. And I would also be okay seeing the wording adjusted a little bit to change to just on death, not necessarily being bounced with cards like Dreams of Restoration. It definitely needs an adjustment. Yawn is very, very dominant right now, but I don't want to see it just completely nerfed into the ground, never sees play again, because the other green options for hero arts are not that good. Nero needs some love, X isn't really in great shape, and Kikosho and Lightning Legs have potential, but they probably need to be buffed a little bit. So those are things that I hope they take into consideration with this balance change. The last one on this list is Shadow Blade. That is Morrigan's hero art. It's 18 AP to deal 4 damage to an enemy unit. If that unit has flight, it's 6 damage. And she recovers life equal to the amount of damage that she deals. One important distinction is that wording is kind of confusing. Let's say your opponent has a unit that has 2 HP and you use Shadow Blade on it and deal 4 damage. You are going to gain 4 HP back, even though it appears you're only really dealing 2 damage. So that's something to keep in mind. I do think that they should adjust that. I don't really think they should adjust the cost or the damage here. Shadow Blade is good, but I don't really think it needs any form of a heavy nerf. You know, Morrigan is one of the few heroes that has multiple viable hero arts, and I want to see that stay that way. You know, Temptation is still playable. You know, Darkness Illusion, not so much. But Shadow Blade, you know, is still really good, specifically for 4s and other types of decks too that don't see as much play. So I don't want to see too much heavy-handed adjusting here. I think Shadow Blade, for the most part, is okay. And again, you know, something else I want to point out, this list could still be adjusted as we go, and they say they're going to let us know the details closer to time. So let me know what you think about these changes. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Is there something not on this list that you think needs to be on here? What needs buffs? What needs nerfs? Let's have a good, juicy discussion about all this stuff, because I love doing that with you guys. I love going through the comments, reading your thoughts, and responding. It's a really good time. So let's make sure that we do that. If you enjoy the TEPPEN content that we're turning out on this channel, be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe so you know when the next one comes out. Until that happens, take care, and I'll see you next time.